Recently, I've been applying Mediterranean principles to my intermittent fasting regimen. I've been applying Mediterranean principles to periodic ketogenic dieting, and the carbs that I've been bringing into my life have been more Mediterranean focused. And maybe it's just the fact that I'm trying to adopt more Mediterranean lifestyles in general. Like I'm trying to be more relaxed, I'm trying to just walk more, I'm trying to embrace relationships and family. I'm trying to really just live that Mediterranean lifestyle, but I've noticed my sleep has improved. Now, full disclaimer, like my kids are getting to an age now where they're sleeping through the night, so naturally maybe my sleep is getting better. But when I really work backwards and I reverse engineer things that are different in my life and my diet now, the Mediterranean diet implementation has improved my sleep quite significantly, or at least I think so. So if I look at the pieces of the equation, I can see why this might be working. Let's break down what parts of the Mediterranean diet could be improving my sleep so that you can apply them. After today's video, check out Timeline Nutrition. If you're interested in longevity and cutting edge research, Timeline is very interesting because they have a unique patented technology called MitoPure that utilizes something called urolithin A, which is derived out of pomegranates, but only 1 in 3 people can actually create it when they eat pomegranates. So they've patented the ability to take this urolithin A and make it usable for everybody. Urolithin A increases autophagy of the mitochondria. It's called mitophagy. Now, MitoPure, the patented technology, has studies published in JAMA and other bodies of research demonstrating that it really does work at stimulating mitochondrial autophagy or mitophagy. So if you're focused on kind of changing your lifestyle and you're really interested in the whole longevity research field, it's worth checking out. So I popped a link down below. You can use the code THOMAS10 and then I'll save you 10% off whatever you want to get from Timeline, whether it's their MitoPure shake, whether it's their berry powder, or their straight up capsules. So that link is down below for 10% off. So the first thing that I've added to my diet a lot, even when I'm not eating a traditional Mediterranean meal, is going to be hummus. Now, the interesting thing with hummus is when you start understanding the research, it makes sense. Hummus is very, very high in vitamin B6. Okay, B6 is critical for 2 important things related to sleep. It is very important for hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that carries oxygen on a red blood cell. Now, I want you to imagine that your red blood cells don't carry as much oxygen, and your red blood cells are flowing into the brain, your blood's flowing into the brain, and your brain is not getting proper oxygenation. It would make sense that that would trigger some wake events, right? You'd probably wake up because you're not getting enough oxygen to the brain. Couple that with the instances of sleep apnea that we see within our society now, not taking good breaths. Poor oxygenation is very much so linked to worse sleep. So for that, B6 is very important and hummus is very high in that. But as I've added hummus into my diet and I'm getting more of these B vitamins that I wasn't getting when I was doing a very strict keto diet all the time, now that I've implemented these things in, I found that B6 is imperative to the biosynthesis of melatonin. So melatonin isn't just formed by magically taking tryptophan, serotonin, and turning it into melatonin. We have cofactors for the biosynthesis of melatonin within our body. And without vitamin B6, it's pretty much impossible to make melatonin. So by giving yourself the B6 via something like hummus or chickpeas, you don't even need much to get this massive effect. So it doesn't have to be consumed with dinner. It's not like a fall asleep type of food. It's just something where, wait a minute, if I'm deficient in these B vitamins that I'm urinating out all the time because they're so water soluble and they need to constantly be replenished, hummus is a great way to do it. Not to mention coupling with the monounsaturated fats you get from olive oil. It's awesome. The other piece is when I was doing just strict keto, which by the way, like I still follow a ketogenic protocol a lot of the time. I just do a Mediterranean flair to it. I've now increased my fiber content quite significantly. Now, full disclaimer, if you're doing something like carnivore, you're kind of exempt from this. Fiber doesn't become as important with carnivore because you've gone all the way the other direction. But once you decide to have a little bit of fiber, it's better to make the decision to go all the way rather than you're either going to be completely none or have a decent amount. The research behind fiber is fascinating. There was a study that was published in Sleep that broke this down. It ultimately found that the better the quality of carbohydrate, i.e. how much fiber was in it to slow it down, led to better slow wave sleep. Now, personally, I wear an Oura ring and I wear a Whoop. Okay, now this isn't a plug for these products, but what I do is I cross-reference the data that I get from these devices. Okay, and I significantly notice a difference when my diet is richer in vegetables and richer in chia and flax and fiber in general, even if it's psyllium husk supplementation. And I notice my overall deep sleep is better. When I'm strict keto, and this is not a jab at keto, I notice that I sit in REM a little bit longer, in light sleep a little bit longer, and a little bit less in deep, which is very, very normal. And arguably, your sleep needs are less when you're low carb or keto. So that makes sense. Okay, you possibly just don't need as much sleep. But I notice that even when I'm on keto and I add more fiber in, my deep sleep increases across both devices. Now, I also feel more restored, but then when you look at the data retroactively, it's quite fascinating. Now, I've also added more dairy into my diet that I didn't have before. Like if you were to ask me 5 or 6 years ago, I was actually quite opposed to dairy. I was worried about the inflammatory effects, I was worried about the casein protein, but then I realized that I live in California, I can get raw milk. Now, I don't say this to kind of like say neener, but like a lot of states can't get raw dairy, okay? In California, I can get raw milk, I can get raw kefir, I can get raw cream, and I can get raw cheese. Okay, now there's a BMC geriatric study that had demonstrated that when you have dairy, or when you have milk or cheese, it impacts sleep quite a bit. In fact, in this study, they took a look at 421 participants and they found there was better sleep onset and better overall sleep quality. And this was with milk or cheese. So what I've tried to do is say, okay, well, how do I put more raw cheese or raw dairy into my life? Like there might be in some Mediterranean cultures that are just living close to a farm or on a farm, right? Now, with that, I also have aged cheeses. So I have more Pecorino Romano now, I have more Parmesan now. I occasionally have Burrata, which is not an aged cheese, but it's delicious. And I've noticed it helps me sleep. But there's also a fine line when I start to overdo it. So I noticed that if I'm going overboard on cheeses that aren't maybe the aged cheeses, I start to get circles under my eyes, I start to get what they call dairy face. And it's a very clear thing and you can recognize it. So what I recommend is a few days per week, maybe add some raw cheese in or maybe some aged cheese and see if it improves your sleep. Kind of swap out some of maybe the other cheeses or the other saturated fats that you might be getting. Maybe try swapping out some of the brisket or the ribeye for a leaner cut of steak with some aged cheese on top of it as your source of saturated fat. There's a study published in the Clinical Sleep Medicine Journal that took a look at fatty fish, and this found that 3 times per week for 6 months having fatty fish improved sleep quality significantly, but it also improved daily function. So it improved like how much people were able to get done throughout the course of the day. And they measured this, so 3 times per week for 6 months. Now, it probably has to do with the omega-3 aspect of fatty fish. But the bottom line here is quite simple. I don't have salmon 3 days per week. My wife doesn't eat fish. So very rarely are we gonna have salmon cooked at our house. If I go out to eat, I'll sometimes have salmon, but even that's a higher chance of finding like farm salmon that's lower quality. So what do I lean into? I lean into sardines, I lean into mackerel, I lean into anchovies, and I get those in a simple canned form that anyone can add. So one of those is a serving. I think if you like fish or you like sardines, adding 3 cans of sardines is a budget-friendly way to get the omega-3s in and potentially improve your sleep. So I'm not trying to just rain on everyone else's parade, get on my pedestal and say that Mediterranean keto is the best or Mediterranean fasting, but the things that I've taught over the years alongside applying these Mediterranean principles just make sense for better sleep. And when you look at Mediterranean cultures, they sleep better, their daily function is better, and I'll be damned, they live longer. I'll see you tomorrow.